Hello and welcome to the third part of the fanfiction reading of Her Touch by BambooGreen. So, yeah, he had a little bit more issues. So, recording just decided to stop randomly, which it's always nice when that happens. I don't know. I think the problem is I'd have to restart my phone in order to make it so it doesn't happen. But that's stupid, and that shit shouldn't happen. But we'll just continue, and I'll read this again. Thanks. Fuck. Chapter 9. Kaju's POV. I paced my small room as I waited for everyone to get ready. The Hagraven had finally spit out Ivan's location after about an hour, and Gramps was sending a small squad. Natsu, Urza, Lily, and myself would be going. It took every fiber in my being not to run out the door right this second to go after her. I blamed the moon for my frayed nerves, but I could tell deep down that wasn't it. Fuck! You keep pacing and you'll fall through to the first floor, Lily said from the door, but I ignored his jibe. I guess. Are they ready to go yet? I snarled. Lily raised an eyebrow as he watched me. Nearly. I understand that she was your partner, but no need to be hostile. We will get her back. I turned and glare at him, but I didn't speak. Why was I getting so hostile? Lily suddenly smiled. I see, I snorted. See what, you old cat? He chuckled at me as he walked towards me. You don't even realize it yourself yet, I snarled. I don't have the patience for games. Spit it out or get out. He shook his head lightly. She's your mate. The wolf in you can sense it. I frowned at him. I barely know the shrimp, I grumbled. It doesn't matter. When a wolf comes in contact with his mate, he can sense it on an instinctive level. We are the same way. He smiled again while I scowled at him. The shrimp, my mate, I thought. But as I thought about it, things made sense now. Her scent that called to me, how every time she laughed or smiled, my nerves would light up. Her very being called to the beast within me. I chuckled softly as I ran a hand through my hair. Even more reason to get her back. I glanced at the window where the sun was slowly approaching the horizon and frowned. We need to leave now. Levy's POV. I paced around my small cell, growing more nervous by the second. The other door in the cell was locked, so I had no chance of getting through it. So I was only left with my thoughts. How would he use me? It didn't make sense. My powers were part of me. It flowed in my blood and made me this way. I paused in my pacing and gasped as it hit me. He kidnapped me on a full moon, the one night a month when all magic was at its most powerful, and all binds on a supernatural form were released. He was going to drain me of my blood and drink it. I felt nauseous at the thought, and before I could think of an escape plan, the locked door opened. I backed to the other end of the cell but ran into a scaly hide. The shadow stalker grabbed my arms and I tried to kick out, but it was no good. Curse my tiny frame. I'm getting real tired of you lizard bastards, I spat as it carried me away, but I didn't stop thrashing. It carried me to a large open room that held what looked like a small altar in the center, beneath a glass ceiling. At midnight, the moon would be in the center of the ceiling and allow the light to be let in. Ivan was there with a smile of death on his face as he watched me struggle. He had a large leather-bound book in his hands and he began to read it out loud. It was an ancient demon language, one that not even I knew, and I could feel the magic beginning to swell in the room. I let out a gasp as I felt it latch on to my being, almost like a parasite, and all the fight left me. Ivan smirked as he continued to speak and motioned to the demon holding me. It chained me to the stone table, and I tried to pull against them, but it was no use. The altar I laid on slowly lifted me into an upright position, and I sagged against the chains holding me up. I tried to run through any spells I might be able to use. Even a preternatural like myself could use simple spells on a full moon. Then it hit me. I glanced at the cuffs on my wrists and smirked lightly. I remember a spell Lucy showed me. I had forgotten my house key at the guild, and she showed me how to unlock the tumbler in the knob. A run-in with the law a short while after proved that the same spell could unlock handcuffs, and if luck was with me, it could undo chains as well. Before I could act, Ivan finished speaking and stepped closer to me, and I had to weakly lift my head so I could see him. He pulled out a grisly-looking knife, and I tried to swallow past the knot in my throat. I gasped as, in a lightning-quick move, he sliced the skin at the base of my neck. It was so fast I didn't feel the pain at first, but as the blood started to flow, the wound burned. I bit back a whimper of pain as they moved a basin in front of me. I was lifted in such a way that the blood from my neck flowed easily into. If it were up to me, I would just sink my fangs in that pretty neck of yours, he sneered, tracing a finger down my throat, and I spat at him. He frowned. But rituals must be followed to a T, he muttered. I kept my eyes locked on his, and as I focused on my magic. He had cut me deep enough that I would probably black out in 10-15 minutes tops. I held my right hand as if it was holding a key and focused, slightly turning it in a way that, hoping he wouldn't notice the minuscule movements of my hand. My luck ran out just as I had nearly unlocked the chains. Again in that lightning-fast movement, he had used that knife to pierce my right hand, and I screamed, instinctively trying to pull my hand away, but I was pinned to the table. He smirked at me as my vision swam, the wound in my hand now making me lose blood twice as fast. I probably only had a few minutes before I blacked out. A new sound came in through the room, coming from somewhere ahead of us. A loud snarl and the sound of flesh ripping and bones crunching. Ivan frowned as he turned towards the door as it burst open. The biggest wolf I had ever seen stood there, his teeth bared and his black fur slick with blood. His normal crimson eyes gold with moon madness. Before Ivan or his demons could attack him, the glass roof above shattered, letting in two winged figures. They landed behind the wolf, knowing he was too focused on the prey before him. The fairy queen's eyes widened as they landed on me. Before she could even move, the demons were on them. With Ivan's attention elsewhere, I focused all my energy back on unlocking myself. The black wolf lunged forward, easily tearing into the demons. Normally a werewolf would be focused on the flesh in front of them, but there's a large bowl nearby with fresh blood only feet away. I bit back a whimper as the chains gave way, but I stayed attached to the table with the knife in my hand. I reached up and ripped it free with a cry before sinking to my knees. I looked up to see a glaring Ivan, but he had no choice but to retreat as the mad wolf came charging at us. I couldn't move as Gagio came running with his fangs bared. I was lucky if I could keep my eyes open. As he drew closer, I opened my arms, allowing the werewolf to slam into me. His jaws clamped onto my left shoulder, and I nearly blacked out from all the pain. Slowly, the form of my arm shifted, and Gazio gasped, his body shaking slightly as he came down from the madness. I smiled weakly before turning my eyes back to the fight before us. I tried to stay awake, but the darkness closed around me, and I let it. Ooh. Chapter 10. Gazio's POV. As soon as the others had arrived, we took off in the direction of Ivan's hideout. It was located in the forest not too far from Extalia, only a couple hours away if we shifted and ran, or in Titania's and Natsu's cases, flew. We all went as fast as we could, hoping we might be able to reach Levy before Ivan could go through with his crazy scheme. The hag raven had told us he planned to use her blood in some ritual in order to gain her powers. Since it was full moon, it would most likely work, and if he succeeds, Levy will die. He would begin the ritual once the moon was high in the sky, and it would be completed at midnight when the effects of the full moon were at their greatest. Damn, it's getting closer to nightfall, I thought, panic slowly beginning to creep up my spine. I could already feel the effects of the full moon, so I knew there wasn't much time before I would be lost. We have to rescue Shrimp before that. I can't afford to lose it yet, especially if what that damn cat said is the truth and Levy is really I shook myself. There wasn't time to think about that. For now, I had to focus on getting her away from Ivan and back to the safety of the guild hall. I could worry about whether or not she was my mate later. I haven't touched so much as a hair on her head. I will rip out his throat. The thought was oddly satisfying, so I ran a little faster. The moon madness was growing, and I could feel the bloodlust. I have to save Levy. I stopped running, shaking my head as red stained my vision. No, not yet. Gagio, Natsu said, landing beside me. You feeling all right? I nodded, panting hard. I can smell them. We're almost there. I have to keep myself together for a little longer. We need to keep moving, Urza told me. The sun is nearly down. Not wasting any time, I took off again. A few more minutes. If I can hang on a few more minutes. Finally, the building came into view. Unfortunately, the madness was pulling hard at my mind, and it was difficult to concentrate. I'm not going to make it. Levy, I'm sorry. When the first wave of demons attacked and the smell of blood filled the air as the fighting began, I lost myself. Something smells good. It was like sunshine and ink, and it set my entire soul ablaze. I gasped as I was suddenly wrenched into my wolf form and thrust back into my human form, totally conscious. The first thing I sensed upon returning to sanity was that I reeked of blood. It didn't take much to realize I was covered from head to toe in the stuff. I could feel my hair sticking to my bare back, and I could feel it dripping I could feel it dripping from the ends. The second thing I sensed was a wonderful taste in my mouth. It was incredible, far beyond anything I had ever eaten. When I looked down after feeling a weight in my arms, I wanted to be sick, and all fondness I may have for the taste turned to pure disgust. Shrimp was wrapped in my arms and was bleeding heavily. The wounds on her neck and her hand were concerning, but they weren't what caused me to take off in the direction of Ixtalia. Her left shoulder had a gaping bite wound, a very familiar-looking bite wound, one that made my knees nearly give out. Something had really had a hold of her, with no intentions of letting go. I did that, didn't I? I wanted to kick something, but instead I ran faster. I was going frustratingly slow because of my human legs, and I couldn't shift with Levy. Not that I could anyways with a full moon high in the damn sky. Or on any other full moon, I may have stopped to appreciate its beauty, since it was the first full moon I had seen in a long, long time. However, I didn't have that kind of time. I didn't have that kind of time. The small wound in my arms was my priority, and she was beginning to look terrifyingly pale. Kaggio, Master asked as I burst through the doors of Ixtalia. What are you? Levy needs help, I said, gasping for air. She was, I couldn't finish, unable to say it. I attacked her. I tried to kill Levy. Wendy, Master shouted, calling to the small medical sprite. She flew in, gasping when she saw Levy's poor condition. Lady Shagat, do you have somewhere we can take her? Wendy asked the white-haired woman. She nodded, ushering us towards the back of the building. Wendy and I followed her into an infirmary, and I gently laid Levy down on one of the beds, making sure never to let go of her uninjured hand. Wendy, knowing I wouldn't let go for fear of being lost to the full moon again, began working without saying a word. She closed her eyes as magic flowed from her tiny fingertips and covered Levy's body in a shimmering blue light. It's lucky tonight's the full moon, she said, wiping her brow after nearly an hour. The light began to fade, and I could see Levy's injuries were nearly healed. My powers were stronger tonight, so I was able to heal most of the injuries. The wound on her shoulder may still take about a week to heal, even with the help of my powers. It will most likely scar, too. Will she? Again, I couldn't bring myself to finish, afraid of the answer. Wendy smiled, placing her hand on my shoulder. She won't turn, Kaggio. I was able to heal her enough that a werewolf bite won't affect her. Thanks, Wendy. I nodded, letting out a long breath. Thank God. When I was gone, I pulled Levy's hand up, lightly pressing my lips against her knuckles before propping my head on the bed. The more I thought about Lee's words from before, the more I knew he had been right. Levy was my mate. I could no longer deny that. Seeing her hurt had nearly ripped my heart out, and I never wanted to see her get hurt like that again. Knowing the worst of her injuries had been my fault, I gritted my teeth, a sharp pain hitting me in the chest. Levy, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. No! What? Oh yeah, let's just take like 20 seconds for the ad to start. Whatever. Although in other news, I guess, this story may end abruptly. Good. No, I'm just kidding. We'll see what happens. All right. Chapter 11, Levy's POV. The first thing I was aware of when I woke up was how lightheaded I was. Right, I nearly lost every pint of blood in me. Just the thought of opening my eyes made me want to pass out again. So I laid there with my eyes closed for a long time, and while I did a quick once-over. My hand felt a bit numb, but I think it should be fine. The cut on my neck was done, though I could feel my skin there was still tender. My shoulder was the worst, a dull throbbing pain, but not something that was too much of a problem. Why does my shoulder hurt? I thought to myself. While I tried to remember, I could feel the pressure on my left hand. It wasn't painful, though. Quite the opposite, actually. It was warm and comforting. And after a minute, I could tell it was a large calloused hand. I don't know how I knew, but on my heart, I knew it was Gaggio's hand. Gaggio, I remembered now. Gaggio had been in full madness when he had tried to tear me to pieces. It wasn't his fault. I knew I had to tell him. I had to wake him and let him know that I don't blame him. I fought my subconscious for what felt like ages, but I didn't know how much time had actually passed. All I knew was Gaggio never let go of my hand. I finally managed to open my eyes, but then I closed them with a quiet groan when the glaring overhead light met my eyes. A large hand gently rested on my eyes, and I blinked against them slowly. Easy there, Pipsqueak. His little voice rumbled, and I smiled slightly. Gaggio very slowly removed his hand so I could grow accustomed to the light. Once I was able to see, I turned my head to look at him. trying not to focus on how much the room swayed. He was looking at me with his hard crimson eyes, his mouth set into a hard line. How long was I asleep? I asked quietly, my throat raw. Most of the night. That little healing sprite got your bleeding to stop and set the broken bone in your shoulder. Only a few minutes until sunrise. I looked to the window, and sure enough, the full moon was sinking below the horizon. And for some reason, knowing Gagio was holding my hand just because of the moon made my heart hurt. That is until he squeezed my hand. I looked towards him to find his head hung down, his long black hair covering his face. He held my hand in both He held my hand in both of his now, and his grip was shaky. Levy, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. His voice was strained as he spoke, and I smiled softly. I reached my bandaged hand over to him and gently moved his hair away, making him look at me. His eyes were so pained and sorrowful, it made my heart ache. I know you would never hurt me, Gagio. I know it wasn't you, I said quietly. He shook his head slightly. That was me. That monster is me. I shook my head and made him look at me. Gagio, you saved me. A monster doesn't save people. A monster doesn't put himself at risk going up against one of the strongest Oni in the world, I said with a soft smile. He just looked at me with wide eyes before shaking his head slightly, letting out a harsh chuckle. You're something else, you know, she grinned slightly. It's one of my perks. Makes me more lovable, I giggled. Yeah, it does, he said quietly, and I blinked at him. What blood I had left seemed to rush to my cheeks, creating a blaze there. Gagio didn't look at me as he thought before speaking. You know, that old cat said something before we came to get you, he started. I didn't believe him at first, but when I came to, out of this madness, to see you dying in my arms, it hit home. He looked up at me and then... He looked up at me and then, his eyes locking with mine. I can't lose you, Levy. You're my mate. I blinked at him after he said it, and my mind was racing. He can't know that. We barely know each other. But I have been around other werewolves and even the were-felines. A mate wasn't something you consciously pick. It was someone who was destined for you, someone who called to the beast within and who would love them with all their being, feeling the same pull within their very soul. Knowing that, I knew he was right. That very pull was there now. Everything about him called to me. His laugh, his smile, his scent, and even the pain look before called me to comfort him in the only way I could. I understand. If you wouldn't want a monster to be... Stop that right now, Gagio. I tried to make my voice sound strong. I forced myself into a sitting position despite his protests, though I felt like blacking out. Wendy's magic was incredible, but she couldn't just produce blood in my veins. Gagio, we are a mated pair, I said, squeezing his hand as hard as I could. Even if I didn't want you, I would be stuck with you. Believe me when I say there's nothing I want more. His eyes widened slightly as I said that, trying to put as much passion into my words as possible. Even before now, when I first met Gagio, I knew I couldn't live without him anymore. And now he had a reason to stay. Oof. He chuckled slightly as I brought my hand to his lips, carefully kissing my white knuckles. Something else, he murmured, and I smiled. Sleeping Beauty's awake, a loud voice called from the door. I turned to see a grinning Lily. I smiled slightly and waved my bandaged hand, the action taking more effort than normal. With Gagio's help, I laid back down, though propped up on the pillows this time, as Lily approached. How are you feeling, little Blue? He asked as he sat on the opposite side of my bed. Dizzy, I said, and he chuckled. That'll happen, he said with a grin. We spoke for a while before a question that had been nagging at the back of my mind finally came out. What happened with Ivan? I asked quietly. The two men exchanged glances while Gagio's hand tightened slightly on my hand. The sun had already risen, but he didn't let go. He got away. We only sent enough people to be able to bring you home. We aren't sure where he is now. I sighed heavily, rubbing my forehead with my injured hand. I'm sorry, guys. We will finally find him, and I'm sorry, guys. We finally find him, and he's gone again, I muttered. Lee chuckled and patted my leg. Your safety is more important. We will find him again, he said with a grin. I nodded a little, though it still bothered me. Lily stood. It's about time I get back to it. Get some sleep, Levy. He said as he left the room. I looked back to Gagio, who was smiling softly, a smile I'd never seen on his face before. Get some sleep, he said quietly. He leaned over and again all of the blood rushed to my face before making me lightheaded, and he pressed his lips softly to mine. I'll be here when you wake up. Okay. We are still going to continue with chapter 12 just because. Okay. Even though I haven't ended, or the story isn't over yet, I think. Well, whatever. We'll deal with that at the end of this. So, okay. Chapter 12, Levy's POV. The next 2 days passed by exhaustingly slow. Gaju was by my side nearly every second. I couldn't help get a warm chest every time I looked at him. He hadn't kissed me again since the first night, but oh, how I wish he would. You need to sleep in a real bed, I sighed, having the same argument with him we had been having since we returned to Extalia. I know sleeping in that chair isn't comfortable. I'm fine, he said stubbornly. Gajil, I smiled, squeezing his hand. I'll be alright, I'm not going anywhere, and no one is going to come here. Ivan is probably long gone, at least until the next full moon. He wouldn't risk capturing me with an entire month left before the next full moon. It would give you too much time to hunt him down. I chuckled when he snorted. I'd do more than hunt him down, he growled. And he knows that. So, I said, fixing a stern frown on him, go sleep in a real bed. I'll be here in the morning when you wake up. Promise. And, I added, we get to return to Fairy Tale in 3 days. I can go, he sighed, standing. Fine. Before he left, he bent down and planted a quick kiss on my forehead, not turning around as he quickly left the room. Was Kajio blushing? The thought sent my own face ablaze, and I found myself grinning like a fool. After learning I was Gajio's mate, I couldn't deny how I felt about him. Less than a week and I'm already in love with the guy. I fell back onto my pillows, still grinning. Someone is cheerful tonight. At the sound of the voice, I sat straight up, scanning the dark for the source. When my eyes fell on a shadowed figure, they widened. Ivan, I gasped. He stepped closer to the bed and into the light from the window. Good evening, Levy. What are you doing here? I snapped, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. What are you doing here? I snapped. Oh, calm down, he smiled, sensing my tension. I'm not here to harm you. I came to talk. To hell you did, I growled, remembering all too well the pain in my hand and throat from his knife. I have come to give you a choice. Quite generous of me, don't you think? A choice? I frowned. Join me. When I snorted, a wicked grin spread across his face. Or I'll kill everyone you love, starting with that werewolf of yours. Gaji would tear you to pieces, I spat, still searching for a weapon. Damn it, why is his room so empty? Not if he's just a normal human. He chuckled. But he isn't. He could be. This piqued my interest. How? If I complete that ceremony on the next full moon and successfully gain your powers, I will be able to use them in ways you could only dream of. Because I am an Oni, and I possess powers of my own, I can use yours to not only turn a human-born supernatural into a human when I touch them, but I also turn them into a human permanently. They would lose their supernatural powers and return to their old human self. That's impossible, I breathed. I can do it, he said confidently. Wouldn't you want that for Gajil, to be able to live a normal life, one where he isn't afraid of a silly little moon, one where he won't have to be weighed down by guilt because of what he does when he loses himself? Even if you can do that, what makes you think I would join you? You'll just kill us all anyway, so what would be the point? If you join me, I will leave your pathetic family alone. Fairy Tale will be safe, and so will your mate. I gasped. How do you... I have eyes and ears everywhere, Levy, he chuckled. Even so, I frowned, knowing it was all too good to be true. He says he'll leave us alone, but I know he's lying. I'm too much of a threat for him to ignore. And even if he did, that would still put every other human-born supernatural in danger, not just the regular humans. Or not to mention just the regular humans. I can't give Ivan what he wants. I'll give you until the next full moon to think it over, Ivan told me. Come to me willingly, or let everyone you love be slaughtered when I come after you. And what if I tell them your plan? He grinned. Then I'll kill your mate. And believe me when I say this, he leaned closer. By the time I finish, he'll hate you for causing him so much pain. I'll very much enjoy watching him beg for death while he curses you. Before I could respond, he vanished. I fell back into my pillows once more, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts raced a million miles a minute inside my head. I can't join Ivan. I can't let him hurt Fairy Tale. I can't let him hurt Gajil. I took a deep breath. held it and slowly released it as I tried to calm myself. If I join Ivan, he might be able to cure Gajil, but who says Gajil has to be cured? I knew deep down that he did, or at least he didn't want to always be afraid of the full moon. What if there's a way I could cure him? Even I can't turn him back into a human. Maybe I could take away his moon madness, making him like any other shifter. I had never heard of such a thing being done before, so I doubted it was even possible. It wouldn't hurt to try, though. If I could, there would be nothing stopping me from telling everyone at Fairy Tale about Ivan, and then we could plan a counterattack. Until then, I have to think of a way to ask for help without making anyone suspicious. I can't risk their lives. Not yet. So, I think we're going to end this episode here, and that is going to be very much the end of this fanfiction reading. Again, if you want to see the end of it, you're going to have to, find the story for yourself and, read it that way. Which, yeah, we'll do that instead. So, because I'm not going to read any more of this on a story in a video just because. So yeah, that'll be it for now. Like, really. Oh boy, his story.